Thank you, seriously, for choosing this masterclass today. Out of all the videos and audio tracks you could have selected, you chose to play this one. That single choice tells me something vital about your mindset. You are not here for basic conversational English or superficial grammar tips. You are here to master the absolute peak of intellectual communication, high-level debate, critical thinking, and the art of rational persuasion. I am Jessica, and today we are launching an elite training series, C1 to C2 Mastering High-Level Debate and Critical Thinking. This is not a conventional vocabulary lesson. This is a comprehensive, deep-dive masterclass engineered specifically for intellectuals, corporate strategists, academics, and ambitious professionals who need to defend their perspectives with absolute confidence, dismantle weak arguments, and negotiate complex truths without ever resorting to thudding aggression or cheap, emotional outbursts. Over this 10-part series, we are going to unlock the exact linguistic architecture used by world-class debaters, top diplomats, and senior analytical minds. Think of this entire journey as a high-intensity workout for your intellect. You don't need to be flawless right from the start. You simply need to show up, stay present, and shadow these structures out loud after me. Before we unlock our first analytical pillar, take a second to commit to your growth. Like this video right now so you never lose this audio asset, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Consistency in deliberate practice will always outperform raw talent. Your future, highly articulate self will thank you for making this investment today. Now, let us be completely candid about how most people handle disagreements. Have you ever been in a high-stakes discussion or a professional debate where someone completely lost their composure? They raised their voice, made aggressive personal attacks, or used dramatic, emotional exaggerations to force their point. How did that make you feel? It immediately destroyed trust and turned a rational discussion into a toxic argument. On the other hand, many brilliant C1 level speakers possess deep, analytical insights, yet when challenged by a dominant personality, they freeze. They fall back on flat, basic phrases like, "I think you are wrong," or "that is a bad idea." There is nothing grammatically incorrect about those basic responses, but in elite circles, flat language signals a lack of intellectual depth. When you want to challenge a powerful figure or dismantle a flawed proposal, you do not need noise. You need precision, emotional detachment, and sound reasoning. Imagine replacing, "Your idea doesn't make sense," with "That proposal relies on a fundamentally flawed premise." Imagine replacing, "Let's be fair and logical," with "We must maintain an objective, dispassionate analysis." Instantly, the psychological weight of your words shifts. You command the room not by shouting, but by bringing undeniable intellectual rigor to the table. Before we step into our first story and practice flow, I want to take a moment to connect with you, our global audience. Where are you listening from today? Are you tuning in from a quiet study in Hanoi, a corporate office in Tokyo, or a coffee shop in London, Berlin, or Sao Paulo? Write your city and country in the comments below right now. We read every single comment, and knowing where our international community gathers helps us tailor these masterclasses for you. Also, if you ever struggle with expressing a complex disagreement, or if you have a specific question about tone and nuance, drop your question below. Our team is here to support your journey every step of the way. In this foundational first part, we are unlocking the core engine of elite debate, the art of rational persuasion and maintaining an objective stance. We will dissect how master debaters separate human emotion from logical analysis, allowing them to remain completely calm while dissecting an opponent's argument. Let us begin with our first core concept: rational objective. To approach a complex debate from a rational objective standpoint means you evaluate facts, data, and logic without allowing personal biases, emotional attachments, or defensive instincts to cloud your judgment. It is the ultimate mark of C2 intellectual maturity. Let us train your speech muscles and cognitive memory right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, steady, and measured cadence. Let your voice carry firm weight. Repeat, rational objective, rational objective. Now, shadow the full professional sentence with me. We must evaluate this proposal from a purely rational objective standpoint. Again, clear, deliberate, and authoritative. We must evaluate this proposal from a purely rational objective standpoint. One more time, with quiet confidence. We must evaluate this proposal from a purely rational objective standpoint. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the psychological driver behind a rational objective: emotional detachment. In high-level debate, emotional detachment does not mean you are cold, uncaring, or robotic. It means you deliberately separate your personal ego from the topic being discussed. When an opponent attacks your idea, emotional detachment allows you to analyze their attack logically rather than taking it as a personal insult. It gives you complete composure under pressure. Let us master this essential C2 phrase. Repeat after me: emotional detachment, emotional detachment. Now, let us link it into a full executive phrase. Maintaining emotional detachment allows us to critique the logic without attacking the person. Let us do it again, mirroring the steady pace of a seasoned diplomat. Maintaining emotional detachment allows us to critique the logic without attacking the person. One more time. Maintaining emotional detachment allows us to critique the logic without attacking the person. Brilliant. To achieve true persuasive clarity, you must also ground your arguments in sound reasoning. Sound reasoning refers to a chain of logic where every premise is backed by verifiable facts, and the conclusions follow naturally without leaps, assumptions, or hidden fallacies. When you speak with sound reasoning and intellectual rigor, the uncompromising commitment to accuracy, depth, and logical consistency, your arguments become virtually indestructible. Let us practice these high-level analytical terms right now. Listen and repeat after me slowly, keeping your tone deeply grounded. Repeat: sound reasoning, intellectual rigor, intellectual rigor. Now, shadow this full declaration with me. Her argument was built on sound reasoning and executed with remarkable intellectual rigor. Again, focus on a controlled, articulate delivery. Her argument was built on sound reasoning and executed with remarkable intellectual rigor. One more time. Her argument was built on sound reasoning and executed with remarkable intellectual rigor. Exceptional work. Notice how slowing down your cadence naturally elevates the perceived intelligence of your speech. That is the physical mechanism of persuasive authority. To see how a rational objective, emotional detachment, sound reasoning, and intellectual rigor operate in a real-world scenario, consider a high-stakes intellectual symposium. Imagine a senior economic strategist named Dr. Aris, who was invited to a live panel discussion on global market policy. His co-panelist was an aggressive, highly charismatic commentator known for using dramatic rhetoric, emotional appeals, and sensational exaggerations to win over the audience. During the debate, the commentator launched a passionate attack against Dr. Aris's proposed trade framework, shouting that the policy was a total disaster that would destroy local communities. The audience gasped, and the energy in the hall became intensely hostile. An intermediate speaker would have panicked, raised their voice, or defensively shouted back. Dr. Aris, however, possessed complete emotional detachment. He sat quietly, maintaining calm eye contact and a relaxed posture. He took notes with absolute composure. When the moderator finally turned to him for a response, Dr. Aris did not show a single trace of anger. He spoke with quiet, undeniable gravitas and persuasive clarity. He looked at the audience and said, "I completely understand the passion behind my colleague's statement, and preserving local communities is a priority we all share. However, if we step back from emotional rhetoric and evaluate the data from a purely rational, objective standpoint, a very different picture emerges." His calm tone instantly neutralized the tension in the room. Dr. Aris then systematically dissected the commentator's claims point by point. He didn't say, "You are lying." Instead, he demonstrated intellectual rigor. He presented verified economic metrics, explained the underlying trade mechanics, and showed how his opponent's conclusions relied on unsupported assertions rather than sound reasoning. By remaining dispassionate, respectful, and relentlessly logical, Dr. Aris completely turned the room around. The audience realized that while his opponent offered noise, Dr. Aris offered truth. He won the debate not by overpowering his opponent, but by elevating the conversation above emotional reactivity. Now, my ambitious friends, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of rational persuasion line by line. This extended, fluid speech exercise is designed to train your vocal authority, refine your pacing, and solidify your ability to articulate complex thoughts under pressure. Relax your shoulders, ground your breath, and repeat out loud after me. In any high-stakes debate or intellectual discussion, a master communicator must maintain absolute emotional detachment and evaluate the core issues from a purely rational, objective standpoint. We must make a deliberate choice to step away from emotional reactivity, cheap exaggerations, and personal attacks. Instead, we must construct our arguments with sound reasoning, backing every claim with verifiable facts and executing our analysis with uncompromising intellectual rigor. When faced with aggressive rhetoric or hostile pushback, an elite speaker does not lose their composure or match the opponent's volume. We remain calm, articulate, and deeply respectful, guiding the audience toward truth through persuasive clarity and logical precision. By separating the individual from the argument and focusing entirely on the validity of the premise, we build credibility that commands respect across any industry. Moving forward, I am committed to elevating my debate style, mastering tone control, and defending my perspectives with unyielding intellectual poise. Incredible practice. You are training your speech and mindset to operate at the absolute highest level. Now, to lock in this foundational knowledge and prime our learning community, take a quick action right now. Look back at our analytical network of words: rational objective, emotional detachment, sound reasoning, intellectual rigor, and persuasive clarity. Choose at least 2 of these advanced terms and write one powerful, professional sentence in the comments below, demonstrating how you approach debate in your own field. Or simply comment "critical mind activated" to signal your commitment to this series. Write your response, keep your focus sharp, and let us transition directly into Part 2, where we will explore the precise language of substantiating claims, demanding empirical evidence, and dismantling unsupported assertions. Welcome back to Part 2 of our C1 to C2 Masterclass on mastering high-level debate and critical thinking. Before we step directly into our next analytical pillar, I want to pause and take a moment to truly connect with you. Wherever you are in the world right now, whether you're commuting through a busy city, taking a quiet walk, or studying with a warm cup of coffee, thank you for inviting me into your day. I'd love to know, where are you tuning in from today? Drop your city and country in the comments below. Also, how is the pacing for you? Does my voice feel natural and easy to follow, or would you prefer a slightly different cadence? Your feedback means the world to us, so please let me know. And if there are specific debate scenarios, professional challenges, or complex topics you want us to cover in future episodes, leave your thoughts below. Our team reads every single message, and we are here to support your growth every step of the way. If you haven't already, take a quick second to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell, and join our growing global community of ambitious, articulate minds. Now, let us transition directly into the second core pillar of elite debate: substantiating claims, demanding empirical evidence, and dismantling unsupported assertions. In any intellectual debate, whether in an academic symposium or a corporate boardroom, the most common trap people fall into is making sweeping, confident statements without a shred of proof. Intermediate speakers often accept these statements at face value or respond with basic, weak objections like, "I don't think that's true," or "Do you have proof?" An elite C2 speaker, however, knows exactly how to hold others accountable to the highest standard of proof. They know how to politely, yet firmly, demand empirical evidence and expose an unsupported assertion without ever sounding rude or confrontational. When you enter a debate, your primary objective is to substantiate your claims. To substantiate a claim means to provide solid, verifiable evidence, data, or logical proof that supports your statement. If an argument cannot be substantiated, it remains a mere opinion, what debaters call an unsupported assertion. An unsupported assertion is a declaration presented as a fact, but backed by zero evidence. When an opponent relies on unsupported assertions, an astute thinker does not attack them personally. Instead, they gently request empirical evidence. Empirical evidence refers to information acquired by observation, experimentation, or verified data rather than personal belief or emotion. Let us train your vocal authority and precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deliberate, and authoritative cadence. Repeat, substantiate a claim. Substantiate a claim. Now, shadow the full professional sentence with me. If you want the board to approve this strategy, you must substantiate your claim with verified data. Again, clear, articulate, and confident. If you want the board to approve this strategy, you must substantiate your claim with verified data. One more time. If you want the board to approve this strategy, you must substantiate your claim with verified data. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the difference between empirical evidence and anecdotal claims. Anecdotal claims are based on individual personal stories or isolated examples rather than broad, reliable research. While an anecdotal story can be interesting, it carries very little weight in a formal debate. An elite communicator points this out gracefully by saying, "While that story is compelling, it remains anecdotal. We need empirical evidence before making a strategic commitment." Let us practice these high-level analytical terms together. Listen and repeat after me slowly. Repeat, empirical evidence, empirical evidence, anecdotal, anecdotal. Now, shadow this full, elegant statement. We cannot base our long-term policy on anecdotal observations when empirical evidence points in the opposite direction. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. We cannot base our long-term policy on anecdotal observations when empirical evidence points in the opposite direction. One more time. We cannot base our long-term policy on anecdotal observations when empirical evidence points in the opposite direction. Brilliant work. To see how substantiating claims, demanding empirical evidence, and exposing unsupported assertions function in a real-world setting, consider a high-stakes corporate strategy session. Imagine a senior marketing director named Clara who was attending a product development meeting. A newly appointed executive stood up and confidently proposed cutting the department's research budget by 50%, claiming dramatically that customers today no longer care about long-term product durability. They only care about fast delivery. The room went quiet. Several team members looked anxious, but nobody knew how to challenge the executive without sounding disrespectful. Clara remained completely composed. She didn't raise her voice or say, "That's completely wrong." Instead, she utilized her C2 analytical tools with absolute poise and diplomatic precision. She looked at the executive, smiled gently, and said, "That is certainly an interesting perspective, and optimizing delivery speed is something we all agree is important. However, declaring that durability no longer matters to our consumer base is a massive assertion. Could you share the empirical evidence or customer metrics that substantiate this claim?" The executive froze. He stuttered slightly and admitted that his observation was based on a casual conversation he had with 2 local clients the previous weekend. Clara maintained perfect tone control and responded, "I appreciate you sharing that experience, but 2 client conversations represent anecdotal feedback, not market research. Our latest empirical data shows that durability remains a top 3 purchasing criterion for 80% of our client base. Therefore, cutting our research budget based on an unsupported assertion would create a severe strategic vulnerability for our brand." By asking for empirical evidence and distinguishing between anecdotal stories and verifiable facts, Clara completely neutralized the risky proposal. She didn't need to get angry or combative. She simply used intellectual precision to protect her company's interests and guide the team back to sound reasoning. Now, my ambitious friends, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of evidential debate line by line. Let your voice capture the calm, firm, and articulate cadence of an elite analytical mind. Relax your shoulders, ground your breath, and repeat out loud after me. In any professional debate or strategic discussion, an elite communicator must distinguish between verifiable facts and unsupported assertions. We must never allow sweeping statements to dictate our decisions without first demanding solid, empirical evidence. While anecdotal stories can provide interesting context, they can never replace rigorous research, verified metrics, and sound reasoning. When an opponent presents an opinion as an absolute truth, a master debater responds with complete composure and diplomatic precision. We do not engage in emotional conflict or personal attacks. Instead, we politely ask for the underlying data and evaluate whether the claim can truly be substantiated. By holding every argument to the highest standard of proof, We protect our organizations from short-sighted decisions and elevate the intellectual quality of the conversation. Moving forward, I am committed to grounding my own arguments in verified facts, challenging weak logic respectfully, and defending my perspectives with unyielding evidential rigor. Exceptional practice. You are sharpening your analytical tools with every single exercise. Now, to lock in this knowledge and keep our comment section vibrant, take a quick moment right now to respond. Tell us in the comments, what is one situation in your career where someone tried to rely on an unsupported assertion? Or simply share your favorite phrase from today's lesson. Keep your focus steady, enjoy your learning journey, and I will see you in Part 3, where we will dive into dissecting flawed logic, identifying fallacies, and neutralizing manipulation. Welcome back to Part 3 of our masterclass on mastering high-level debate and critical thinking. Today, we step into our third core pillar, dissecting flawed logic, identifying logical fallacies, and neutralizing manipulation. In any high-stakes discussion, you will inevitably encounter opponents who use faulty reasoning, either out of poor analytical discipline or as a deliberate attempt to manipulate the audience. Intermediate speakers often feel that something is wrong with an opponent's argument, but because they cannot pinpoint the exact logical flaw, they struggle to respond effectively. An elite C2 speaker, however, possesses the trained eye to spot flawed logic instantly, name the specific fallacy, and dismantle it with surgical, diplomatic precision. When an argument contains flawed logic, it means the structure of the reasoning is fundamentally broken. The conclusion does not naturally or validly follow from the premises provided. A specific type of flawed logic is known as a fallacy, a mistaken belief or a misleading argument based on unsound reasoning. One of the most common fallacies used in corporate and political debates is the straw man argument. A straw man argument occurs when an opponent intentionally oversimplifies, distorts, or exaggerates your original position to make it easy to attack, rather than addressing your real, nuanced point. Another deceptive tactic is the red herring. A red herring is an irrelevant topic introduced into a debate to divert attention away from the original, crucial issue. When an opponent realizes they are losing on facts, they introduce a red herring to trigger emotional reactions and derail the conversation. To neutralize these fallacies, an elite communicator does not lose their temper. They calmly point out the structural flaw by saying, "That is an interesting point, but it represents a straw man argument. Let us return to the primary issue." Let us train your vocal authority and precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, steady, and authoritative cadence. Repeat, flawed logic, logical fallacy, logical fallacy. Now shadow the full professional sentence with me. We cannot accept a strategy that relies on fundamentally flawed logic. Again, clear, articulate, and confident. We cannot accept a strategy that relies on fundamentally flawed logic. One more time, we cannot accept a strategy that relies on fundamentally flawed logic. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of straw man argument and red herring. Repeat after me, straw man argument, red herring, red herring. Now, shadow this full, elegant statement. That objection distorts our position into a straw man argument rather than addressing our actual proposal. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. That objection distorts our position into a straw man argument rather than addressing our actual proposal. One more time. That objection distorts our position into a straw man argument rather than addressing our actual proposal. Brilliant work. To see how identifying fallacies and neutralizing flawed logic work in a real-world setting, consider an intense corporate board meeting. Imagine a senior technology officer named David who presented a plan to upgrade the company's cybersecurity infrastructure over a 12-month period. A risk-averse board member immediately stood up and aggressively shouted, "David wants us to spend our entire profit margin on software updates while leaving our sales team with zero budget." Notice what the board member did. David never suggested spending the entire profit margin, nor did he touch the sales budget. The board member created a classic straw man argument to make David's plan look reckless and extreme. Instead of getting defensive or shouting back, David maintained complete emotional detachment and composure. He looked at the board member, smiled politely, and addressed the room with quiet gravitas. He said, "I appreciate your focus on protecting our sales budget, and maintaining our commercial momentum is something we all agree is vital. However, claiming that this proposal consumes our entire profit margin is a straw man distortion of what was presented. Our cybersecurity budget represents less than 3% of our operational reserves." David then addressed a second board member who tried to divert the topic by complaining about the office parking lot, a classic red herring. David responded smoothly. While facilities management is an important operational detail, bringing up the parking lot right now is a red herring that distracts us from our immediate cybersecurity vulnerabilities. Let us keep our focus entirely on evaluating our technical risk metrics. By naming the straw man argument and politely bypassing the red herring, David restored logical order to the room. The board recognized his intellectual rigor, ignored the emotional distortions, and unanimously approved the security upgrade. Now, my ambitious friends, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of logical dissection line by line. Let your voice capture the calm, firm, and articulate cadence of an elite analytical mind. Relax your shoulders, ground your breath, and repeat out loud after me. In any high-stakes debate, an elite communicator must remain vigilant against flawed logic and deceptive arguments. We must never allow logical fallacies, straw man distortions, or emotional red herrings to manipulate our judgment or derail a critical discussion. When an opponent attempts to misrepresent our position or divert attention to irrelevant topics, we respond with absolute composure and precision. We do not engage in personal conflict or raise our voice. Instead, we identify the logical flaw clearly, reframe the core issue, and guide the audience back to sound reasoning and empirical facts. By holding every discussion to the highest standard of intellectual integrity, we neutralize manipulation and ensure that truth and clarity prevail. Moving forward, I am committed to sharpening my critical thinking, spotting fallacies effortlessly, and defending my perspectives with unyielding logical precision. Exceptional practice. Keep your focus steady, and let us transition directly into Part 4, where we will explore unmasking cognitive biases, identifying blind spots, and preserving objectivity. Welcome back to Part 4 of our masterclass on mastering high-level debate and critical thinking. Today, we step into our fourth core pillar, unmasking cognitive biases, identifying intellectual blind spots, and preserving absolute objectivity. In high-level debates and corporate decision-making, the most dangerous obstacles to truth are often not external lies or hostile opponents, but internal psychological traps known as cognitive biases. Intermediate speakers frequently fall victim to their own unconscious biases or fail to recognize when an opponent is arguing from a deeply entrenched psychological blind spot. An elite C2 communicator, however, possesses the psychological awareness to identify these cognitive traps in real time, call them out diplomatically, and restore absolute objectivity to the discussion. At the center of psychological analysis is the concept of cognitive bias. A cognitive bias is a systematic error in thinking that occurs when people process and interpret information in the world around them, affecting the decisions and judgments that they make. One of the most prevalent and destructive biases in professional debate is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is the subconscious tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms or supports one's prior beliefs or values, while completely ignoring or dismissing contradictory evidence. When a team or leader is trapped by confirmation bias, they develop an intellectual blind spot, an area in their thinking or strategy where they are completely blind to obvious risks or alternative perspectives because their preconceived notions block out reality. To dismantle cognitive bias without making people feel attacked or stupid, an elite speaker uses subjective perception versus absolute objectivity. They politely point out that a conclusion may be influenced by subjective perception and gently guide the conversation back to objective, verifiable metrics. Let us train your vocal authority and precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, steady, and deeply analytical cadence. Repeat. Cognitive bias. Cognitive bias. Confirmation bias. Confirmation bias. Now, shadow the full professional sentence with me. We must ensure our strategic evaluation is not clouded by cognitive bias. Again, clear, articulate, and confident, we must ensure our strategic evaluation is not clouded by cognitive bias. One more time, we must ensure our strategic evaluation is not clouded by cognitive bias. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of intellectual blind spot and confirmation bias. Repeat after me. Intellectual blind spot. Intellectual blind spot. Now, shadow this full, elegant statement. Relying solely on favorable metrics creates a dangerous intellectual blind spot driven by confirmation bias. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. Relying solely on favorable metrics creates a dangerous intellectual blind spot driven by confirmation bias. One more time, relying solely on favorable metrics creates a dangerous intellectual blind spot driven by confirmation bias. Brilliant work. To see how unmasking cognitive biases and identifying intellectual blind spots work in a real-world setting, consider a critical corporate strategy review. Imagine a chief risk officer named Elena who was reviewing a proposed international market expansion project presented by a highly passionate sales director. The sales director stood before the executive committee with glossy slides, showing glowing customer surveys and highlighting every single positive data point that supported entering the new region. However, Elena, possessing a sharp analytical mind, noticed that the sales director had completely omitted recent regulatory changes and rising local operational costs in that region. When questioned, the sales director dismissed the regulatory risks as insignificant minor details and immediately brought up another positive survey. Notice what was happening. The sales director was suffering from severe confirmation bias. He was so emotionally invested in pushing the expansion that he selectively gathered positive data while remaining completely blind to massive financial and legal liabilities. Instead of accusing him of dishonesty or shouting, "You are lying to us," Elena maintained complete composure and tone control. She addressed the executive committee with quiet gravitas. She said, "I admire the enthusiasm and passion behind this market expansion proposal, and the positive customer response is certainly encouraging. However, as an executive team, we must guard against confirmation bias. By highlighting only the favorable survey data while dismissing major regulatory shifts, we are creating a severe intellectual blind spot." She looked at the sales director with complete respect and empathy, adding, "Our goal is not to kill this project, but to evaluate it with absolute objectivity. To protect our enterprise, we must conduct an independent audit that examines both the market potential and the regulatory liabilities before we commit capital." By identifying confirmation bias and highlighting the intellectual blind spot, Elena saved her company from making a premature, high-risk investment. She didn't need to be aggressive. She simply used psychological precision to steer the leadership team back to rational, evidence-based decision-making. Now, my ambitious friends, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of cognitive analysis line by line. Let your voice capture the calm, firm, and articulate cadence of an elite analytical mind. Relax your shoulders, ground your breath, and repeat out loud after me. In any high-stakes debate or strategic decision-making process, an elite communicator must remain deeply aware of cognitive biases and psychological blind spots. We must never allow confirmation bias to manipulate our judgment, cause us to cherry-pick favorable data, or blind us to obvious operational risks. When an opponent or colleague argues from a place of subconscious bias, a master debater responds with absolute composure and psychological precision. We do not engage in personal confrontation or accuse others of dishonesty. Instead, we gently expose the blind spot, highlight the missing evidence, and guide the conversation back to objective, verifiable facts. By holding ourselves and our organizations to the highest standard of cognitive discipline and intellectual honesty, we make sound decisions that withstand the test of time. Moving forward, I am committed to examining my own assumptions, unmasking psychological biases, and pursuing truth with absolute objectivity and intellectual poise. Exceptional practice. Keep your focus steady, and let us transition directly into Part 5, where we will explore embracing counterintuitive truths, challenging the status quo, and presenting paradoxical arguments. Welcome back to Part 5 of our masterclass on mastering high-level debate and critical thinking. Today, we step into our fifth core pillar, embracing counterintuitive truths, challenging the status quo, and presenting paradoxical arguments. In high-level intellectual and strategic debates, the most groundbreaking insights are rarely obvious. They often run completely counter to popular opinion, traditional wisdom, or common sense. Intermediate speakers often struggle when defending a non-traditional idea. Because their proposal sounds unusual, they become defensive or overly aggressive when met with skepticism. An elite C2 communicator, however, knows how to introduce a counterintuitive perspective with subtle diplomacy, framing it not as a reckless gamble, but as a sophisticated, game-changing truth that traditional thinking has overlooked. At the heart of innovative critical thinking is the concept of something being counterintuitive. Something is counterintuitive when it goes against what common sense or basic intuition would lead you to expect. For example, in business strategy, cutting prices during an inflation crisis to capture massive market share might sound completely counterintuitive to traditional managers who only focus on short-term margins. When you present a counterintuitive truth, you are directly challenging the status quo. The status quo refers to the existing state of affairs, current traditions, or accepted industry norms. Most people instinctively defend the status quo because it feels safe, predictable, and comfortable. To persuade an audience to abandon traditional wisdom, an elite speaker introduces a paradoxical argument, an argument that initially appears contradictory or absurd on the surface, but upon deeper, logical analysis reveals a profound, highly effective truth. Rather than demanding that people immediately accept an unorthodox idea, a master debater uses paradoxical framing to guide the audience step by step through the logic until the counterintuitive truth becomes self-evident. Let us train your vocal authority and precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deliberate, and deeply persuasive cadence. Repeat: counterintuitive, counterintuitive, status quo, status quo. Now shadow the full professional sentence with me. To achieve a breakthrough, we must embrace a counterintuitive approach and challenge the status quo. Again, clear, articulate, and confident. To achieve a breakthrough, we must embrace a counterintuitive approach and challenge the status quo. One more time. To achieve a breakthrough, we must embrace a counterintuitive approach and challenge the status quo. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of paradoxical argument and unorthodox strategy. Repeat after me: paradoxical argument, paradoxical argument. Now, shadow this full, elegant statement. While it sounds paradoxical on the surface, reducing working hours actually increased our team's total productivity. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. While it sounds paradoxical on the surface, reducing working hours actually increased our team's total productivity. One more time. While it sounds paradoxical on the surface, reducing working hours actually increased our team's total productivity. Brilliant work. To see how counterintuitive truths, challenging the status quo, and presenting paradoxical arguments work in a real-world setting, consider an Executive Innovation Summit. Imagine a Chief Technology Officer named Julian, who stood before his company's board of directors to propose a radical shift in software development. The company's traditional status quo was to keep all core technology strictly proprietary and secret from competitors. Julian proposed making their core foundational code open source, giving it away to the public for free. The moment he stated his proposal, several senior directors looked shocked. One board member immediately interrupted, shouting, "That is completely absurd. Giving our technology away for free destroys our competitive advantage and ruins our business model." An intermediate speaker would have panicked or argued defensively. Julian, however, possessed complete composure, emotional detachment, and tone control. He smiled politely, maintained firm eye contact, and addressed the board with quiet gravitas. He said, "I completely understand why this proposal sounds alarming at first glance. Protecting our intellectual property has been our status quo for 2 decades, and giving code away seems entirely counterintuitive. Julian then deployed his paradoxical argument with absolute logical precision. He continued, however, let us examine the paradoxical reality of software ecosystems today. By making our base architecture open source, thousands of independent developers worldwide will build tools that rely exclusively on our platform. We won't lose market share. We will establish our architecture as the global industry standard. We give away the foundation for free so we can monetize the high-value enterprise services built on top of it. He systematically presented empirical metrics from other tech firms that had successfully executed the exact same unorthodox strategy. By acknowledging the initial counterintuitive nature of his plan and explaining the paradoxical mechanics clearly, Julian transformed the board's fear into fascination. The board realized that what sounded like a reckless risk on the surface was actually a brilliant, forward-thinking strategy. They unanimously voted to approve the open-source initiative. Now, my ambitious friends, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of counterintuitive reasoning line by line. Let your voice capture the calm, persuasive, and articulate cadence of an elite analytical mind. Relax your shoulders, ground your breath, and repeat out loud after me. In any high-stakes debate or strategic planning session, an elite communicator must have the courage to explore counterintuitive truths and challenge the status quo. We must never allow comfortable traditions or conventional wisdom to blind us to paradoxical, high-leverage opportunities. When presenting an unorthodox idea that challenges existing assumptions, a master debater responds with complete composure, patience, and logical precision. We do not become defensive when met with initial skepticism. Instead, we acknowledge the counterintuitive nature of the concept, dismantle the surface-level contradiction, and guide our audience step by step through the underlying paradoxical logic. By elevating our thinking beyond obvious conclusions and testing non-traditional strategies against empirical facts, we drive genuine innovation and create sustainable competitive advantages. Moving forward, I am committed to questioning the status quo, articulating complex counterintuitive truths, and presenting paradoxical arguments with unyielding intellectual poise. Exceptional practice. Keep your focus steady, and let us transition directly into Part 6, where we will explore the power of nuanced perspectives, avoiding black-and-white thinking, and navigating gray areas. Welcome back to Part 6 of our masterclass on mastering high-level debate and critical thinking. Today, we step into our sixth core pillar, the power of nuanced perspectives, avoiding black-and-white thinking, and navigating gray areas. In high-level debates, one of the clearest markers of an intermediate mind is dichotomous thinking, the bad habit of reducing complex, multifaceted issues into rigid black-and-white choices, such as good vs bad, right versus wrong, or innovation versus tradition. Real-world problems in business, technology, and global policy are rarely so simple. They exist almost entirely in complex gray areas. An elite C2 speaker excels at presenting a nuanced perspective, demonstrating the intellectual depth to evaluate multiple competing variables simultaneously without falling into simplistic traps. At the center of advanced analytical speech is a nuanced perspective. A nuanced perspective is an approach that recognizes subtle distinctions, fine details, and contextual variations rather than making sweeping generalizations. When you bring a nuanced perspective to a debate, you reject false dichotomies. A false dichotomy is a logical error where an opponent forces you to choose between two extreme options while ignoring a wide range of middle ground solutions or hybrid models. To master nuanced debate, an elite communicator learns to navigate the gray area, the middle ground where facts are conditional, trade-offs exist, and context dictates the optimal choice. Rather than declaring an idea totally right or totally wrong, a master debater uses context-dependent analysis. They explain that the validity of an argument depends on specific variables, such as timing, scale, regulation, or market conditions. Let us train your vocal authority and precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deliberate, and deeply analytical cadence. Repeat nuanced perspective, false dichotomy, false dichotomy. Now shadow the full professional sentence with me. We must adopt a nuanced perspective rather than accepting a false dichotomy. Again, clear, articulate, and confident, we must adopt a nuanced perspective rather than accepting a false dichotomy. One more time, we must adopt a nuanced perspective rather than accepting a false dichotomy. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of gray area and context-dependent. Repeat after me: gray area, context-dependent, context-dependent. Now, shadow this full, elegant statement. Navigating this gray area requires a context-dependent analysis of our operational risks. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. Navigating this gray area requires a context-dependent analysis of our operational risks. One more time. Navigating this gray area requires a context-dependent analysis of our operational risks. Brilliant work. To see how nuanced perspectives, avoiding false dichotomies, and context-dependent analysis work in a real-world setting, consider an international ethics and technology panel. Imagine a senior AI strategist named Dr. Maya, who was invited to debate the global regulation of artificial intelligence. Her opponent was a sensationalist commentator who shouted dramatically, "We must choose right now. Either we ban AI development completely to protect human jobs, or we allow total, unrestricted freedom for tech corporations." Notice what her opponent did. He created a classic false dichotomy, forcing the audience to choose between two extreme, unworkable options. An intermediate speaker might have panicked or picked one of the two extremes to defend. Dr. Maya, however, possessed complete composure, emotional detachment, and tone control. She smiled politely, maintained firm eye contact, and addressed the audience with quiet gravitas. She said, "I appreciate the passion behind my colleagues' concern for human employment, and protecting livelihoods is a priority we all share. However, forcing us to choose between a total ban and total deregulation creates a false dichotomy that ignores reality." Dr. Maya then deployed her nuanced perspective with absolute analytical precision. She continued, "AI deployment is not a black and white issue. It exists entirely in a complex gray area. Our policy response must be context-dependent. In high-risk sectors like healthcare and autonomous transportation, we need strict, audited safety regulations. But in creative, research, and administrative tools, we can encourage open innovation. We do not need a blunt, blanket ban. We need precision frameworks that balance ethical safeguards with economic progress." By rejecting the false dichotomy and illuminating the nuanced gray area, Dr. Maya completely transformed the debate. The audience and panel moderators realized that her approach offered a realistic, sophisticated path forward, while her opponent's extreme binary view was useless for actual policymaking. She won the debate by bringing intellectual depth and context to a complex global topic. Now, my ambitious friends, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of nuanced reasoning line by line. Let your voice capture the calm, firm, and articulate cadence of an elite analytical mind. Relax your shoulders, ground your breath, and repeat out loud after me. In any high-stakes debate or strategic evaluation, an elite communicator must reject simplistic black-and-white thinking and embrace a nuanced perspective. We must never allow hostile opponents or dramatic commentators to trap us in false dichotomies that oversimplify complex realities. When facing multifaceted challenges, a master debater responds with absolute composure and analytical rigor. We do not jump to extreme conclusions. Instead, we illuminate the gray area, evaluate competing variables, and deliver context-dependent solutions that balance risks with opportunities. By holding ourselves to the highest standard of intellectual depth and refusing to settle for superficial answers, we command respect and guide our organizations toward sound, sustainable decisions. Moving forward, I am committed to dismantling false dichotomies, articulating nuanced perspectives, and navigating complex gray areas with unyielding poise. Exceptional practice. Keep your focus steady, and let us transition directly into Part 7, where we will explore diplomatic refutation, softened counterarguments, and respectful dissent. Welcome back to Part 7 of our masterclass on mastering high-level debate and critical thinking. Today, we enter one of the most practical and crucial skills of professional life: diplomatic refutation, softened counterarguments, and the art of respectful dissent. In high-stakes corporate environments, you will frequently disagree with senior executives, key stakeholders, or valued clients. Intermediate speakers often handle disagreement in one of two damaging ways. They either stay quiet out of fear of confrontation, allowing flawed ideas to pass, or they disagree aggressively, using blunt phrases like, "You are wrong," or "I completely disagree with your logic." Aggressive rejection triggers immediate defensiveness, destroys psychological safety, and closes down productive conversation. An elite C2 communicator, however, has mastered the art of diplomatic refutation. They know how to dismantle a flawed premise, present a counterargument, and protect the organization's interests with absolute firmness, all while making the other party feel respected and heard. At the heart of elegant disagreement is the principle of respectful dissent. Respectful dissent is the ability to express a conflicting opinion or oppose a decision in a manner that honors professional relationships, upholds corporate dignity, and focuses entirely on facts rather than personalities. To execute respectful dissent, an elite communicator uses softened counters and polite rebuttal frameworks. A softened counter uses conversational buffers to validate the valid parts of an opponent's idea before introducing a counterperspective. Rather than saying, "That won't work," a master debater uses a caveat, a warning or specific condition that must be considered. They say, "I acknowledge the potential of this initiative. However, I must introduce a critical caveat regarding our capital reserves." Let us train your vocal authority and diplomatic precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, steady, and deeply respectful cadence. Repeat: respectful dissent, respectful dissent, diplomatic refutation, diplomatic refutation. Now, shadow the full professional sentence with me. We must cultivate a culture of respectful dissent to ensure our decisions are thoroughly vetted. Again, clear, articulate, and completely poised. We must cultivate a culture of respectful dissent to ensure our decisions are thoroughly vetted. One more time, feeling the calm strength behind the delivery. We must cultivate a culture of respectful dissent to ensure our decisions are thoroughly vetted. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of softened counter and critical caveat. Repeat after me, softened counter, softened counter. Now, shadow this full, elegant statement. Before accepting this timeline, I must offer a softened counter with a critical caveat about our supply chain capacities. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. Before accepting this timeline, I must offer a softened counter with a critical caveat about our supply chain capacities. One more time. Before accepting this timeline, I must offer a softened counter with a critical caveat about our supply chain capacities. Brilliant work. To see how diplomatic refutation, respectful dissent, and softened counters work in a real-world setting, consider an executive product review. Imagine a chief operating officer named Victor, who was attending a strategic launch meeting. The chief marketing officer, a senior and powerful figure in the company, presented an aggressive proposal to launch a new flagship product in 6 weeks, claiming that hitting the market early was vital to beating competitors. However, Victor knew from operational data that the quality testing team needed at least 12 weeks to ensure system stability. Launching in 6 weeks carried a 70% chance of major software crashes upon deployment. An intermediate speaker might have stayed silent to avoid offending the CMO, or bluntly shouted, "That launch date is impossible and irresponsible." Victor, possessing complete emotional detachment, tone control, and diplomatic poise, addressed the room calmly. He looked at the CMO, smiled respectfully, and said, "I completely validate your drive to capture market share early, and maintaining our competitive speed is a goal we all share. Your strategic vision on this market opportunity is spot on." Notice what Victor did. He validated the intention first. Then he executed a masterclass in diplomatic refutation. He continued, "However, while I support the objective, I must offer a softened counter rooted in our operational data. Our quality engineering reports introduce a critical caveat. Accelerating the launch to 6 weeks leaves our core software vulnerable to severe deployment crashes. Bypassing quality testing might give us an early market entry, but a buggy release would inflict permanent damage on our brand integrity." Victor then presented a win-win workaround. Instead of a full commercial launch in 6 weeks, what if we execute a controlled beta release to select clients? That allows marketing to capture immediate consumer feedback while granting engineering the time needed to finalize system stability. By using diplomatic refutation and offering a constructive workaround, Victor protected his company from a catastrophic product failure without embarrassing or angering the CMO. The CMO accepted the beta launch proposal with gratitude, praising Victor for his strategic foresight and professional diplomacy. Now, my ambitious friends, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of diplomatic refutation line by line. Let your voice capture the calm, firm, and respectful cadence of an elite executive. Relax your shoulders, ground your breath, and repeat out loud after me. In any professional debate or executive discussion, a master communicator must master the art of diplomatic refutation and respectful dissent. We must never allow fear of conflict to keep us silent when critical strategic risks are overlooked, nor should we allow emotional anger to make our disagreements combative or personal. When challenging a senior colleague or opposing a risky proposal, an elite speaker responds with absolute composure and diplomatic poise. We validate the underlying positive intentions, frame our counterarguments around verified empirical facts, and introduce critical caveats that protect long-term organizational value. By disagreeing with dignity and replacing blunt conflict with constructive workarounds, we elevate team trust, protect corporate integrity, and drive superior outcomes. Moving forward, I am committed to practicing respectful dissent, delivering softened counters with grace, and defending truth through diplomatic precision and unyielding poise. Exceptional practice. Keep your focus steady, relax your breath, and let us transition directly into Part 8, where we will explore deconstructing extreme exaggerations, neutralizing rhetoric, and grounding conversations in reality. Welcome back to Part 8 of our masterclass on mastering high-level debate and critical thinking. Today, we focus on a vital analytical skill: deconstructing extreme exaggerations, neutralizing emotional rhetoric, and grounding conversations in reality. In high-stakes debates, political forums, and corporate negotiations, opponents often resort to hyperbole, using sensationalized language, catastrophic predictions, and dramatic exaggerations to manipulate the audience's emotions. Intermediate speakers often get swept up in the emotional storm. They either become panicked by the dramatic claims or respond with equal aggression, turning a professional discussion into a shouting match. An elite C2 communicator, however, acts as an emotional stabilizer in the room. They possess the linguistic precision to de-escalate dramatic rhetoric, expose hyperbole without attacking the speaker, and pull the conversation firmly back to verified, objective reality. At the core of rhetorical analysis is identifying hyperbole. Hyperbole is deliberate, extreme exaggeration used for emotional effect, not meant to be taken literally, but designed to provoke panic, anger, or fear. When an opponent uses hyperbole, claiming a minor operational delay is a total disaster or a budget adjustment will destroy the company, an elite speaker responds by neutralizing rhetoric. To neutralize rhetoric means to strip away emotional adjectives, sensationalism, and dramatic framing, isolating the core facts beneath the noise. Once the emotion is removed, a master debater works to ground the discussion. Grounding a discussion means redirecting everyone's focus away from hypothetical catastrophes and back to measurable data, realistic probabilities, and proportionate responses. Actions that match the true scale of the problem rather than an exaggerated crisis. Let us train your vocal authority and precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, steady, and deeply grounded cadence. Repeat, hyperbole. Hyperbole. Neutralize rhetoric. Neutralize rhetoric. Now, shadow the full professional sentence with me. We must look past the hyperbole and neutralize the rhetoric before making a decision. Again, clear, articulate, and completely grounded. We must look past the hyperbole and neutralize the rhetoric before making a decision. One more time, we must look past the hyperbole and neutralize the rhetoric before making a decision. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of ground the discussion and proportionate response. Repeat after me, ground the discussion. Ground the discussion. proportionate response, proportionate response. Now, shadow this full, elegant statement. Let us ground the discussion in actual metrics so we can craft a calm, proportionate response. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. Let us ground the discussion in actual metrics so we can craft a calm, proportionate response. One more time. Let us ground the discussion in actual metrics so we can craft a calm, proportionate response. Brilliant work! To see how deconstructing hyperbole and neutralizing rhetoric work in a real-world setting, consider a high-pressure crisis meeting. Imagine a chief risk officer named Sarah, who is addressing an emergency meeting regarding a supply chain delay in an overseas manufacturing plant. A stressed department manager stood up and shouted dramatically, "Our entire international supply chain has collapsed. We are going to lose all our primary accounts and ruin our reputation by the end of the month." Notice what the manager was doing. He was using severe hyperbole and catastrophic rhetoric, causing immediate panic among the executive team. An intermediate speaker might have absorbed the panic or shouted back, "Stop exaggerating." Sarah, possessing complete emotional detachment and tone control, sat quietly, breathed deeply, and addressed the room with unshakable composure. She looked at the team, kept her voice slow and steady, and said, "I completely understand why news of a supply chain delay creates anxiety, and protecting our key client relationships is our absolute priority." Sarah then systematically neutralized the rhetoric and grounded the conversation. She continued, however, describing a 3-day customs backlog in one factory as a total collapse of our global supply chain is hyperbole that does not reflect reality. Let us step back from dramatic panic and ground this discussion in verified operational facts. She presented the audited logistics report. Out of our 5 international shipping corridors, 4 are operating at 100% capacity. The delay affects only 6% of our total quarterly inventory. This is a localized logistics bottleneck, not an existential crisis. Sarah then introduced a calm, proportionate response. Instead of declaring an emergency and alarming our clients, we will temporarily reroute shipment allocations from our secondary warehouse. This resolves the bottleneck within 48 hours with zero disruption to client deliveries. By deconstructing the manager's hyperbole and remaining completely dispassionate, Sarah extinguished the panic, restored rational thinking, and guided her team toward an efficient solution. She demonstrated that elite leaders do not react to emotional noise. They anchor the room in truth and proportional action. Now, my ambitious friends, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of rhetorical neutralization line by line. Let your voice capture the calm, firm, and steady cadence of a master thinker. Relax your shoulders, ground your breath, and repeat out loud after me. In any high-stakes discussion or corporate crisis, an elite communicator must remain an anchor of calm, rational thinking. We must never allow dramatic hyperbole, emotional rhetoric, or catastrophic predictions to cloud our judgment or provoke unnecessary panic. When facing exaggerated claims or sensational language, a master debater responds with absolute composure and psychological precision. We do not engage in emotional arguments. Instead, we strip away the dramatic rhetoric, expose the exaggeration politely, and ground the discussion firmly in empirical facts and measurable metrics. By replacing emotional reactivity with proportionate responses and logical analysis, we restore order, protect organizational trust, and deliver effective solutions under pressure. Moving forward, I am committed to neutralizing hyperbole, evaluating risks objectively, and leading every conversation with unyielding poise and clarity. Exceptional practice. Keep your focus steady, take a calm breath, and let us transition directly into Part 9, where we will explore synthesizing opposing views, dialectical thinking, and higher-order resolutions. Welcome back to Part 9 of our masterclass on mastering high-level debate and critical thinking. Today, we elevate our focus to one of the most sophisticated mental models of C2 debate and executive moderation, synthesizing opposing views, dialectical thinking, and reaching higher-order resolutions. In complex enterprise negotiations, public policy forums, and board meetings, a debate often stalls when two opposing factions become entrenched in their respective positions. Intermediate speakers view debate as a zero-sum game, a win-lose battle where one side must completely defeat the other. However, an elite communicator understands that true intellectual leadership is not about destroying an opposing perspective. It is about synthesizing opposing views. They act as a master debater and moderator, using dialectical reasoning to absorb the valid arguments from both sides and construct an elevated, unified solution. At the core of this advanced methodology is dialectical thinking. Dialectical thinking is a structured intellectual process derived from classical philosophy, operating on three distinct stages: the thesis, the antithesis, and the synthesis. The thesis represents the original argument or proposal. The antithesis represents the directly opposing argument or counterperspective. Rather than allowing the thesis and antithesis to clash continuously in frustrating gridlock, an elite debater creates a synthesis. A synthesis is not a weak, watered-down compromise where both sides give up what matters most. It is a higher-order resolution, an innovative, integrated framework that combines the core strengths of both positions while eliminating their respective flaws and operational vulnerabilities. Let us train your vocal authority and precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, steady, and deeply integrative cadence. Repeat: dialectical thinking, dialectical thinking. Synthesize opposing views, synthesize opposing views. Now, shadow the full professional sentence with me. By applying dialectical thinking, we can synthesize opposing views into a unified strategy. Again, clear, articulate, and completely authoritative. By applying dialectical thinking, we can synthesize opposing views into a unified strategy. One more time, feeling the integrative weight behind every word. By applying dialectical thinking, we can synthesize opposing views into a unified strategy. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of thesis and antithesis and higher-order resolution. Repeat after me: thesis and antithesis, thesis and antithesis, higher-order resolution, higher-order resolution. Now, shadow this full, elegant statement. Instead of forcing a binary choice between the thesis and antithesis, we must construct a higher-order resolution. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. Instead of forcing a binary choice between the thesis and antithesis, we must construct a higher-order resolution. One more time. Instead of forcing a binary choice between the thesis and antithesis, we must construct a higher-order resolution. Brilliant work. To see how dialectical thinking, synthesizing opposing views, and achieving a higher-order resolution function in a real corporate setting, consider a strategic board standoff. Imagine an executive vice president named Julian, who was presiding over a tense, meeting regarding the company's global software architecture. The executive committee was fiercely divided into two hostile camps. The first camp presented the thesis. They demanded migrating all corporate systems immediately to a fully public cloud infrastructure to maximize scalability and reduce physical server maintenance. The second camp presented the antithesis. They fiercely opposed the cloud migration, demanding that all sensitive customer data remain on legacy, private, on-premise servers to guarantee data security and regulatory compliance. The debate had dragged on for hours, turning into an emotional stalemate with raised voices and entrenched opinions. Julian, possessing complete emotional detachment, tone control, and integrative presence, stepped forward to lead the room. He did not take a side, nor did he ask one team to simply surrender. He looked at both factions, smiled calmly, and said, "Gentlemen, we are locked in an unnecessary conflict because we are treating this as a binary choice. The cloud proposal offers valid scalability, while the on-premise argument offers valid security. Instead of fighting over these two positions, let us synthesize these opposing views into a higher-order resolution." Julian then presented a hybrid dialectical architecture. We will build a multi-tiered, private cloud hybrid model. Non-sensitive operational applications will deploy to the public cloud for maximum speed and scale, while our core proprietary encryption keys and customer databases remain secured within dedicated, private on-premise enclaves. By deploying dialectical thinking, Julian validated the core priorities of both teams and built a superior framework that neither side could have developed alone. The gridlock dissolved instantly. Both camps recognized that the hybrid synthesis was safer and more scalable than their original isolated proposals. The board approved the unified framework unanimously. Now, my ambitious friends, let us practice shadowing this exact framework of dialectical synthesis line by line. Let your voice capture the calm, integrative, and authoritative cadence of an elite executive mind. Relax your shoulders, ground your breath, and repeat out loud after me. In any complex debate or high-stakes corporate negotiation, an elite communicator must rise above binary conflicts and master the art of dialectical thinking. We must never view strategic disagreement as a destructive battle to be won or lost, nor should we settle for weak compromises that sacrifice core performance. When facing entrenched opposing perspectives, a master debater responds with absolute composure and intellectual clarity. We carefully analyze the thesis and antithesis, isolate the valid truths within each argument, and synthesize competing views into a higher-order resolution. By transforming ideological gridlock into innovative collaboration, we build indestructible organizational alignment, protect enterprise value, and drive sustainable success. Moving forward, I am committed to practicing dialectical reasoning, bridging ideological divides, and leading every strategic conversation toward higher-order resolutions. Exceptional practice. You are mastering the highest form of intellectual leadership. Keep your focus sharp, relax your shoulders, and let us transition directly into Part 10, where we will conclude our masterclass by unlocking intellectual humility, moral integrity, and sealing your identity as a master thinker. Welcome to Part 10, the final summit of our masterclass on mastering high-level debate and critical thinking. Today, we bring our journey to its ultimate destination: intellectual humility, moral integrity, and sealing your identity as a master thinker. Throughout this series, we have unlocked the foundational weapons of C1 to C2 debate, from sound reasoning, empirical evidence, and logical fallacies to cognitive biases, counterintuitive framing, nuanced perspectives, diplomatic refutation, rhetorical neutralization, and dialectical synthesis. But as you reach the pinnacle of critical thinking, you realize a fundamental truth. The ultimate goal of debate is not to win every argument, destroy your opponents, or flex your intellectual superiority. The true mark of a world-class debater is an unyielding commitment to the pursuit of truth, guided by intellectual humility and moral integrity. An intermediate speaker views debate through the lens of ego. They refuse to admit when they are wrong, manipulate data to save face, and cling to faulty logic out of personal pride. An elite C2 communicator, however, separates their ego from their ideas. They exercise intellectual humility, the cognitive capacity to recognize the limits of one's knowledge, embrace new evidence, and willingly refine or abandon a position when proven wrong by facts. At the core of elite intellectual leadership is moral integrity, the unwavering commitment to truth, honesty, and ethical standards in every discussion, negotiation, and strategy. When you combine high-level critical thinking with moral integrity, you cultivate an open-mindedness that earns the deep respect of peers, executives, and international audiences alike. You become a leader whose words carry unquestioned weight because everyone knows you fight for truth, not personal victory. Let us train your vocal authority and precision right now. Listen carefully and repeat out loud after me with a calm, deeply grounded, and inspirational cadence. Repeat, intellectual humility. Intellectual humility. Moral integrity. Moral integrity. Now, shadow the full professional sentence with me. True debate mastery requires a balance of rigorous critical thinking and intellectual humility. Again, clear, articulate, and deeply authoritative. True debate mastery requires a balance of rigorous critical thinking and intellectual humility. One more time, feeling the profound weight behind every word. True debate mastery requires a balance of rigorous critical thinking and intellectual humility. Outstanding. Now, let us examine the concepts of open-mindedness and pursuit of truth. Repeat after me, open-mindedness, open-mindedness, pursuit of truth, pursuit of truth. Now, shadow this full, elegant statement. By leading with open-mindedness, we remain dedicated to the pursuit of truth above personal ego. Again, focus on a controlled, mature delivery. By leading with open-mindedness, we remain dedicated to the pursuit of truth above personal ego. One more time. By leading with open-mindedness, we remain dedicated to the pursuit of truth above personal ego. Brilliant work. To see how intellectual humility, moral integrity, and open-mindedness operate at the absolute peak of leadership, consider a monumental corporate review. Imagine a chief executive officer named Arthur, who was presiding over a final investment decision for a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure project. Arthur himself had spent 2 years designing and advocating for this specific expansion plan, and the entire executive board knew it was his personal flagship proposal. During the final review, a young data scientist raised her hand nervously. She presented a newly compiled, real-time stress test that revealed a critical mathematical flaw in the project's financial projections. Under severe market volatility, Arthur's proposal carried an unforeseen 40% chance of insolvency. The room went completely silent. Several senior vice presidents tried to shut the young analyst down, accusing her of using flawed data, desperate to protect the CEO's project and save Arthur from embarrassment. An arrogant leader would have used their power, charisma, and status to dismiss the analyst, double down on their original plan, or manipulate the metrics to save face. Arthur, however, possessed complete intellectual humility and unyielding moral integrity. He raised his hand, signaling the room to remain silent. He carefully examined the analyst's data with total objectivity, emotional detachment, and calm composure. After 3 minutes of quiet calculation, Arthur looked up, smiled warmly at the young scientist, and addressed the executive board with quiet gravitas. He said, "I want to thank you for your rigorous analysis. The stress test metrics are accurate, and they expose a severe vulnerability that my original framework failed to predict." He looked at his executive team and said, "Our commitment as leaders is not to defend my personal ego or protect my past proposals. Our commitment is to the financial health of this enterprise and the pursuit of truth. Based on this empirical evidence, I am officially withdrawing my expansion proposal, and we will redesign our strategy around these new risk parameters." The entire board stood and delivered a prolonged ovation. Arthur did not lose respect by admitting a mistake. He cemented his status as a legendary leader. He proved that true authority does not come from being infallible. It comes from having the moral courage, intellectual humility, and integrity to follow the truth wherever it leads. Now, my brilliant, ambitious friends, let us practice shadowing our final, most comprehensive leadership statement line by line. This extended exercise synthesizes everything you have learned in this masterclass, locking in your vocal authority, refining your cadence, and sealing your identity as an authentic, articulate, and elite C2 global thinker. Relax your posture, ground your breath, and repeat out loud after me. To achieve true mastery in debate and critical thinking, a senior communicator must pair analytical rigor with intellectual humility and moral integrity. We understand that genuine leadership is not asserted through emotional noise, aggressive manipulation, or stubborn pride. It is commanded through sound reasoning, empirical evidence, and unyielding composure under fire. In every strategic meeting, high-stakes debate, and complex negotiation, I choose to speak with logical precision, emotional detachment, and diplomatic poise. I possess the cognitive flexibility to identify cognitive biases, dismantle logical fallacies, and evaluate complex gray areas through nuanced, context-dependent perspectives. When presented with counterintuitive truths or compelling counter-evidence, I respond with open-mindedness and courage. I step away from personal ego, embrace empirical facts, and synthesize opposing viewpoints into higher-order resolutions that elevate our entire organization. Moving forward, I am dedicated to honoring the pursuit of truth, challenging flawed assumptions respectfully, and defending my perspectives with unyielding intellectual poise, moral integrity, and C2 global eloquence. Congratulations! You have officially completed this complete 10-part masterclass on mastering high-level debate and critical thinking. You have built a world-class cognitive and linguistic network that will transform how you analyze, persuade, debate, and lead for the rest of your career. Keep listening, keep practicing, and continue leading with vision, truth, and unyielding gravitas.